Mathematics is science. This statement is actually quite controversial. There are many mathematicians who disagree with this. They think that mathematics is something entirely different from science. So what's the truth? Is math a science or not? Well, to answer this question, we have to first ask another. What is science? Most people will say science is about observing nature and finding patterns in nature and then coming up with explanations for those patterns. That's a pretty good definition. So science is about understanding how things work and why they happen. Now, if you think about it, this definition actually applies to mathematics as well. When we do mathematics, we also observe patterns. For example, we observe that whenever we have two numbers and we add them together, the result is the same regardless of the order in which we do the addition. No matter whether we add 2 plus 3 or 3 2, the result is always 5. This is a mathematical pattern. And just like in science, we come up with an explanation for this pattern. In mathematics, this explanation is called the commutative property of addition. In fact, all of mathematics is about understanding patterns and coming up with explanations for those patterns. Therefore, mathematics is science, but some people will still argue that mathematics is not a science because mathematicians don't do experiments. But this is not a good argument because science is not just about doing experiments. There are some branches of science, like physics and chemistry, where experiments are very important. But there are other branches of science where experiments are not necessary. For example, in astronomy, it is impossible to do experiments. Astronomers can only observe what is happening out there in space. Yet astronomy is still considered a science because it follows the scientific method of making observations and then trying to explain those observations. Mathematics is in the same boat. We can't really experiment with mathematical concepts. We can only observe patterns and try to explain them. But wait, there's more. In science, explanations have to be predictive. This means that a good scientific explanation should allow you to predict what happens in new situations. For example, if you know that the commutative property of addition holds for all natural numbers, you can use this to predict what will happen when you add 123 plus 456. You can predict that 123 456 will equal 579, and that's exactly what happens. The commutative property of addition is a good mathematical explanation because it allows us to make predictions about what happens when we add numbers together. Therefore, mathematics is science. Of course, there are some mathematicians who will still disagree. They will say that mathematics is not science because it is abstract and it is not based on observations. But this argument doesn't hold water because mathematics is as real as anything else in the universe. The patterns that we find in mathematics exist just as much as the patterns that we find in nature. And just like we use mathematics to describe patterns in nature, we can also use it to describe patterns in math. So there you have it. Mathematics is indeed a science. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.